Whereabouts in Pomeland are you from?
I have a very strange accent on the grounds that I was born in Merseyside.
Merseyside.
Liverpool.
Right.
Most of the time I say Liverpool because Aussies don't know where Merseyside is. If I say Liverpool, then people will say you're not a true Scouser, you see, if they know what they're talking about.
Yes.
So I have to be careful.
You've got a softness of Scouse without the full. Oh.
I moved to Derbyshire when I was about 15, and I didn't understand that. I didn't know that I had an accent until I landed there. I mean, we're talking like about two and a half hours drive.
Yeah.
And I turned up to school, and nobody could understand a word I was saying. So I literally had to tone down my accent and speak slower so that kids at school could understand me. And then I went to university at Newcastle in the north, and that's another very strong accent. And I didn't really pick that up, but I
had some friends up in Hartlepool.
Oh, sorry about
That's
that.
you. I had some friends up in Hartlepool. And I remember seeing.
What they call the monkey hangers.
Yes, yeah, from the Abbey.
Yeah.
And I've got some other friends down actually right either in like western side of London and something like that, and then a couple like we used to go in and out of the port at Southampton when I worked on cruise ships.
My missus is from Southampton.
Oh, wonderful. It's a beautiful place. I think that was the first time I'd ever set foot in England.
Right.
But I think if anyone's really after that sort of, I don't know, that English, the fairy tale sort of thing, I found that Boscastle was really nice for that.
Which one's Boscastle?
It's the one that's got the Witch Museum.
Where's that?
You go, okay, so you've got England, really geographical, accurate England, and you come down, it's around here.
Right, okay, because
the other
I have
side.
to explain that
The other side of the bottom from
when
London.
I said where did you come from when I first arrived out here, I was living in Norwich.
Yep.
And I had to people just look at you blankly and you go, you know that bumpy bit, the arse of
yes,
middle of that.
Boscastle is like around there as well.
I've heard of it. Yes.
Yeah. It's I feel like it's coastal, but it's like in the S Bend coastal.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I remember seeing the ocean and being really surprised, but I wasn't sure if it
brown
was just
it
a big
was.
lake or not.
Is that an ocean? It looks brown. Yeah, it's brown. It usually is brown.
No, this one was blue. That's why it was picturesque, because it was actually blue. And I remember seeing a boat dock, like a boat ramp, a concrete boat ramp, but I don't remember ever seeing any pebbles.
It must have been in the summer.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. I was not going to go to England in the winter. It was only 24 degrees though, so
right.
I was horrified. Everyone else was wearing singlets and sweating and saying how hot it is, and I'm like, this is freezing.
Yes.
I do not want to go swimming.
The other thing is that the very British thing to do is as soon as the sun appears, is you'll see people wandering around half naked.
Yes.
And it's like,
quick,
it's
get
weird.
all the vitamin D
Really
right
weird.
now.
But I, as a POM, thought that was really weird, but that is a very sort of typical thing. People just strip off and you're like, really, please, no.
It's reflective
Yeah.
stuff. So tell me a bit about the books you've written.
Right, well, I have written, let's see, now 2 novels, and I have also been writing short stories, so I've now completed 31 short stories for my Ambo Tales series, which was spawned from the first novel. What happened was that it's very unusual for me to actually be on camera and the like, because I've tried to keep a low profile for many years on the grounds that I write about a paramedic in Brisbane, working for a fictitious ambulance service called the Brisbane City Ambulance Service. Unfortunately, there is only one ambulance service in Brisbane, and by default that sort of means that I am reflecting on them, on my employer. So I have been very, very careful about my anonymity up until probably in the last year, where I've just thought, I don't care anymore.
You can always place it under fiction and keep safe.
Absolutely keep it under fiction. It is
little,
all fiction.
The little disclaimer at the start saying
disclaimer
that
everything.
If there's a likeness to anything or any persons, it is purely coincidental.
Absolutely.
Except for like street names.
But, I mean, I have said that, there are organisations and buildings and the like, so the character will go to places like the Royal Brisbane and Prince Charles Hospital and stuff like that, because that's part of location and place and keeping things realistic. But around 2012, 2010, I got my critical care, it used to be known as intensive care paramedic level, and I got a little bit frustrated because there are positions on the rapid response vehicles, which we call pod vehicles, that drive around, and they're supposed to back up. At that level, you're supposed to be backing up crews to the more high acuity stuff.
Yeah.
And I got frustrated because I'm maybe a little bit outspoken. Maybe there was reasoning behind it. I wasn't getting on the pod, and so I was left on a truck and getting very frustrated, going to very mundane, low acuity stuff that is just mind-numbing at times.
Yeah.
And I would.
What sort of stuff does that entail? Is that like someone thinks they've hurt themselves, or?
Well, some perfect examples in the last few weeks, basically, blocked nose in a 30-year-old.
Right.
That gets categorised by the system as being breathing difficulties. So the crew goes lights and sirens to somebody with a blocked nose.
Oh no.
And the crew will read it and go, why are we going code 1 to this?
Didn't they have an ad campaign about not using a steamroller to open a walnut?
Unfortunately, you see, yes, that was about 2009, 10, something like that.
I remember seeing that. I haven't watched TV and things.
The thing is that what that completely missed was the point that the people that were calling ambulances would call a steamroller to crack nuts if it was free.
Yeah.
If you could make a free phone call, I've got some nuts here I need cracking, I'll call a free steamroller in and they'll come and crack the nuts for me.
Yep.
Or I'll call a removalist to move my TV because it's free.
Yeah.
It sort of missed the point.
Yep.
And unfortunately, I mean, it is a worldwide problem. We're getting more and more calls because unfortunately we do have an increasing acopia. That's a made up word. It is sort of used more medically, but people who are unable to cope with society and just living. Mm-hmm. And I believe it's part to do with the sort of dissociation between sort of age groups and the like. It used to be that people would be in a big circle of friends and family and the like who would have that support and go, well, you've had that knee problem now for 6 months. Have you not thought of going to see the doctor?
Yeah.
Right? Now people are so separated and isolated, then they'll go, oh, this is really hurting me. I'm going to call an ambulance because I can't organise I can't get to sleep because my knee's hurting.
Yeah.
I should have done it 6 months ago, but now I can't get to sleep, so I'm going to call an ambulance because there's no doctors.
Yeah.
And we go to those all the time.
Isolation is such a big problem for people, and it's not just, oh, I'm isolated and I feel lonely, or I haven't checked up on stuff, or people haven't checked up on me. It's also got such a deeper societal issue where you see a whole generation of people that are terrified of having children because they've never been raised around children. They've never experienced babies and children and the natural steps that take to raise them. So they're like, whoa, no.
We go to a lot. I mean, we go to a lot of jobs where the highest category is all of the codes. We call it code 1 for lights and sirens.
Yeah.
So there's a 1A, 1B, 1C. So if a job comes in that's 1C and there's a 1A or 1B nearby, while you go to that, you'll get diverted to the higher category case.
I've actually seen that happen where we've called an ambulance for someone who thinks they're having a chest problem or they're having some kind of breathing problem, and then the ambulance has had its lights on, it's coming towards us, and then U-turn.
Yep.
And we're like,
so you get a 1A, and then we'll go off that. And so that can often, 1As are breathing difficult, severe breathing difficulties, or not breathing, or struggling to breathe. And, unfortunately, they've softened all of the definitions, and so non-clinicians are determining that somebody's agonal breathing, which is the breaths you take just before you die. Oh, wow. And so we go to a lot of kids with agonal breathing, which those are the sort of jobs you really don't want to go to. And you get there and it's first time mum on her own, or new family.
Yeah.
They don't have the support of grandparents and the like around them, or
Yeah.
near to them, and they call an ambulance because the kid stopped breathing, and you go, yeah, kids do that. That's just something they do.
Yeah.
They'll hold their breath. They go blue a bit, and then they'll go. And
Or they start to get tummy pain, or an adult will start to get tummy pains they've not had before. They don't think they've eaten anything weird, and suddenly they think that they're having a heart attack.
Yes. We get. I mean, those are very common, and we don't mind going to those at all, because you get there and you go. I mean, I would much rather go to a well-perfused baby who's smiling and interacting normally than I would go to a pale floppy kid that needs a lot of interventions, and those are the ones that really sort of get your pulse racing.
Yeah.
What we refer to as sphincter moments. They're the ones that you go, right, we've got to really start
One of my friends
working.
has a saying. She was studying to be a paramedic, and whenever she got nervous, she'd say her butthole was winking.
The
Sphincter moment. I'm so glad it's universal in different words.
Absolutely. So back to the stories. At around after, I came over here in 2008. Got to this ICP level at 2010, and then had a couple of years of going by of not getting the more high acuity stuff, because often if you're on a truck, they won't send you to the backup, because the KPIs are all organised for getting trucks to jobs and transporting, and the podcasts are sort of out of the matrix for that.
Yep.
So it's a lot simpler just to keep sending me to, if you're on a truck, to the lower acuity stuff. And I was ranting a lot, and my missus eventually sort of said, look, put it into a book. Why don't you write a story? Why don't you write something? Just do something like that. And so I really took Mark Twain's advice far too literally. And
he has a lot of advice.
Yeah.
Which ones are you talking about?
Write what you know.
Yes.
And I wrote about, I effectively wrote a murder mystery about an intensive care paramedic stuck on a truck, getting frustrated with his management, fictional management, of course.
Fictional management.
Fictional.
I feel like management from any job could be frustrating.
And it's a government organisation, so you can...
Even more
so. And he believes that somebody is bumping off the regular patients. Now, regular patients are, again, it's one of those concepts that people sort of think, I called an ambulance once, and then I had to call one 6 months later. Am I getting to be a regular patient? No. Regulars are the ones that call ambulances, we're talking at least once a day.
Oh, God.
Yeah, or, if a week goes by and they haven't called an ambulance, that's an event.
Yeah.
And in one of the characters who in my book, so a neighbour says, I knew something was wrong because I haven't seen an ambulance here for a few days. So that's the regular level that some people call ambulances.
Ooh.
And so the main character, Jono, thinks that somebody's bumping off regulars, not because of how they're dying, but just the regulars are dying in high numbers.
I just realised when you said the main character's name is Jono. Sorry, everyone. This is Harry Colfer.
Oh, hello.
We did a really terrible introduction. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Right, carry on. Jono's finding that the regulars are being bumped off.
And so he sort of starts banging the drum about it, and that's where the sort of story starts developing. And
That sounds riveting. That sounds really
it's very much people who've read it, and the feedback I've got is it's very much a Brisbane story. It is on the streets of Brisbane. There's a lot of after it took me 2.5 years to write, and once I'd got it done, it was like, yeah, that's it. Excellent, off we go. And I think that's what my talk at the Writers' Festival is going to be about, is that resilience that you need as a writer. Because if anybody had told me then it was going to be another 6.5 years before I'd actually get it into print, I would have just thought, that was ridiculous. So yeah, it takes a long time to get a book out. Dead Regular, the main part of the reason for me is that I sent it off to get it edited, and then I got, eventually, that took a long time. And during that process, as I say, it took 2.5 years to write the first one, and because all my spare time had been taken up writing, it was just like, what do I do now? And then I just started writing the sequel. The sequel took about 5 months to write.
Oh, it's so much the case. The
It-
first one always takes longest. My first book was 16,000 words, just short. It was meant to be like a little introduction to the world, and that one took me like a year. Every other one took me about 3 months.
Yeah. The thing is that the first one, I got that, but it had to be plotted because it was a murder mystery. You had to have all of the sort of potentials and lots of different people involved and all that sort of stuff. The potential sort of murderers and the like, and so it was far more complicated. Whereas the second book, Beneath Contempt, Beneath Contempt is that was a pantser one. That was written from Jono's gone off to Mornington Island to get away from what happened in Brisbane, and it just was linear, and it's much more of a thriller. He gets embroiled, about not giving too much away, but in people smuggling and the like. So it's all very much sort of action and the like. But again, as a paramedic, and the medical sort of sides and the humour is all still there, which is a strong point. And I'll get onto that humour aspect, because what I found was and part of the delay in publishing the first book was my concern about my employment. Writers don't make much money, and I'm
not on one book.
no, and I didn't want to risk my employment, that I might sort of upset somebody in management and the like by publishing this if potentially threaten my job, and so I was very concerned about that. Hence why I am actually that. Harry Colfer is my pseudonym. So if you go and Google paramedics, because all of us are registered now, you won't find a Harry Colfer amongst there, because it's my pseudonym that I've been writing under. And so yes, I produced this. I had this idea that I've got this draft, and it's now been edited, and then stuff come back, and then it was like, okay, about 5 or 6 scenes got deleted.
Oh.
And I then came up with this idea, that whole thing about kill your darlings, and you've got to be able to go, no, just cut it, dump it. It doesn't make the story flow. It doesn't advance the characters or the story. You've got to get rid of it. Fair enough, but I just didn't want to dump it, and so I came up with this idea of rewriting them as short stories, and then releasing them as ebooks to test the waters with the employer. And by then after I had these 6, and then I came up with the idea, well, wouldn't it be cool to write one for each of the AMPDS codes? Now, we code emergency calls under a system that's Advanced Medical Priority Dispatch System, AMPDS, and there's 32 codes. So number 1 is, I'm trying to remember, abdominal pain, and number 10 is chest pain. So it's alphabetical. So 1 to 32 is alphabetical. And I thought it'd be really cool to do a short story. Now, I really didn't think about this, because they're about 4,000 or 5,000 words each.
Yep.
And so you're looking there for about 150,000 words to get it completed.
Yep.
And
that's a lot of words.
That's a lot of work.
That's a lot of words.
I have just discovered, or I have discovered over time, that it's a lot of work. And I sort of then got focused more in the short story stuff, and I effectively, because there were scenes that were deleted from Dead Regular, they were prequels to the novel, and so they're all based in 2012, which again was A, when I started writing, but B, you have to locate time-wise when a medical story is going to place, because it changes so rapidly.
Yes.
And so I had to say, this is in 2012, that's where it is going to happen, and therefore I don't have to keep checking and changing the way things are done. And so, started writing these and got very much sort of bogged down with that. I then submitted one to Adaptable with Queensland Writers' Centre, and lo and behold, one of the short stories got picked to pitch. And I was down to go to the Gold Coast Film Festival to pitch to the producers, etc., and just little things sort of happened, because that was announced in February, and then a little thing happened called COVID, and everything got cancelled. And so the pitch to the producers became Zoom meetings, and you had 15 minutes.
Things get so lost in that.
I had just moved house and my internet was dreadful, and so at least 50% of every call that I had with the producer was sorting out and ironing out the technical issues with the port bandwidth. One of them we resorted to a phone call and chatting on the phone, but then it was still only cut down to 15 minutes, so it really dramatically reduced the time for the pitch. I did have one Ludo Studios who was very interested, and they were asking for more stuff, and that went on. And as the whole producing sort of publishing sort of thing that I've discovered is it's so long-winded. It takes so long.
Yes.
And so I'm there sort of hoping that this is going to come. That, you know, you can imagine this Netflix series of each of my short stories being. Yeah. They then decided after one meeting that about 5-6 months afterwards, they then decided that it was better suited for a book. And since I had a book already in the wings waiting, I just went, and I couldn't go through another 6 to 12 months again of processing trying to get a publisher. So I just sort of said, well, stuff it, I'm just going to self-publish this. And so I self-published in November 2020, Dead Regular, and then I I put the first chapter of book 2 at the back of it, in the published version, and sort of said that I would be getting this out at the early parts of 2021, and that's when I dusted off the manuscript for the digitally dusted off, I'll have to say, the manuscript for book 2. Only to discover the edits that I thought I'd done I hadn't done.
Oh no.
And I was like, oh my god. So I then had to do all of the edits, and so I actually spent more time doing the edits of book 2 than I did actually to write it. And then finally got it out in November 21. And so the plan now, this year I've been focusing, I did submit one of my short stories to a competition sometime in July last year, and then it won. It was the S.D. Harvey short crime story.
Oh,
award.
excellent.
And it won, and the presentation was in November. And that little thing about COVID, of course, Queensland at the time wasn't allowing anyone back in. So I could have gone to the award in Sydney, where there was all of these, because it was done at the Kennedy Awards.
You wouldn't have been able to come back.
I wouldn't have been able to come back.
Yeah, my mum had the same issue.
And it was such a massive, I mean, it was great that it got recognised and it got won. And then it was this fantastic opportunity for marketing with all of these journalists around. And yeah, I couldn't go. Oh. So that was a little frustrating. And so then I thought, hold on a minute, there's competitions. And so this year I've been working on competitions, submitting all of the short stories that I've been writing. So start of the year, I think I'd got 22 done. So I still had, 24 done. So I had 8 left to write. And so this year I've literally been writing those and other short stories, the shorter form ones, and submitting them to different competitions. Like I've had a short one done through Springy Bark. I came second place in the Springy Bark competition, and then other ones I've got as finalists. Dead Regular became, I think it was a finalist in the Indie Book Awards, which are the American ones, the Next Generation Indie Book Awards.
Well done.
So yeah, and so I'm still waiting on about 5 competitions to find out whether they go. But the idea is that in November this year, I'll publish a paperback version of the Ambo tales, which up until now have all just been ebooks, and actually have it as a physical book, but it will be like this.
Yeah, it'll be a brick.
But the idea is to have a whole load of rosettes on it, so I've got a few to go.
Fantastic.
So that's the idea. So.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And then book 3 is next year.
So, what are we in for book 3? Is Jono coming back to Brisbane?
Yes.
Excellent.
And it's done in the 24 style, so the whole book is on one day.
Oh.
And it's all very much not
rapid.
wanting to put too much about it. High Acuity is the name of the book 3. I'm halfway through it, and it's centered around the airport. And
so exciting.
what could you imagine could happen at an airport? So it's more to do with terrorism.
International or domestic?
It's domestic terrorism, but it's got an international flavour to it that is so. But that may have something to do with book 3. There has to be a linear reasoning, and so with people smuggling in book 2, book 3 has got a link to that. I was talking to Catherine Howell, who was at Ambo in Sydney, and she wrote books, and her take, because she had the whole write what you know thing, she couldn't work out a way of having a paramedic in a series of books. So what she did was she had a female detective, and every book had an aspect of paramedics and Ambo work and stuff like that in it.
Yeah. And
she, I think, wrote 8 in the series. I can't remember the name of the main detective now. And I was sort of saying I was wanting to do this as a paramedic and as the main character, and she said, well, I couldn't work out a way of getting it. And so effectively what's happening is one book leads to the next book and causes the next book. And I've got the 4th one now sort of penciled in as to what I want, and that'll be the end. The 4th one is Show Cause, which is a term where effectively means show cause why you don't get sacked.
Yes.
So that is sort of the subject of book 4. There was going to be a 5th in the series, but I've had to dump it because it was going to be this fictional ambulance service, of course.
Fictional ambulance service.
An outbreak of a epidemic, and how unprepared the fictional ambulance service were for dealing with. And I can't.
No, I feel like
way too political, way too dangerous.
It is too soon.
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
Later on, definitely.
Maybe sometime.
Yeah.
But yes. And that was going to be a disease caused by a combination of the common cold and Hendra because it being Brisbane.
Oh no, bats. Did you think of this before the pandemic?
Yes.
Oh my god.
Yes. I was just like,
there
is a pandemic. God damn.
You're in the future. Oh my goodness. You know what? You could still do it if you make it different viruses. Maybe just not Hendra. Oh my goodness.
I think 32 stories, some other little short stories, and 4 books is enough for Jono.
That's
I think
amazing.
that's going to be enough for him. But that will then free me up to just start working on other things. There's a detective in book 1, and he's quite a central character in book 2, and he's will be in most of the series. I'm thinking of doing I've already got a novel sort of penciled out for a spin-off with him as the main character, and that then obviously opens up far more avenues for further books with him as a main character. But I have other ones which are more science fiction related, because my background is as a scientist, so I used to be a marine biologist.
Oh,
so
very cool.
There's plenty of scope in that sort of side of things to then sort of come up with other ideas for books.
You can definitely carry on writing what you know.
Yes, that's the idea. So it's a safer thing that at least it gives that. Although there are some, you still have to use your imagination, but you are basing that imagination in reality and real things that are happening. And so a lot of the feedback that I've got from the books is that they are real. They're as if you're there.
Yeah.
And the best sort of thing is that I've had paramedics say, yes, this is how it really is. And again, that's part of a very ironic statement, which I realise the irony is that having a fictional book allows you to be more realistic.
Yes.
Because all of the TV shows for ambulance work, which are very popular, aren't realistic. Most of us don't particularly watch them because they're not. Yes, they are real footage, but they are. How should we put it? Manipulated in the fact that they will not. They're sanitized. We have a very, very dark sense of humor, and
like nurses.
Absolutely,
and
police. Police. It's all the same thing, because what it does is it allows you to dissociate from what you're seeing and what you're experiencing. It's a protective mechanism for your own psyche to survive in the environment that we work in.
Yeah.
And it's that statement of too soon. We're making jokes in the write-up room after we've done the patient off.
Yeah.
So it's immediate, and it's some of the jobs which are more confronting are less so. But we tend to just talk about those, and that's where a lot of the storytelling sort of thing is. And that's part of my stories, is I want to embrace that sort of storytelling habit that we have, and try and get that down on paper and introduce people to reading about it. But there's no way you would be able to have the reality TV shows saying the things that we say because it would alienate the viewers. People would not understand it. It would be very confronting for them, and so having it I am actually able to do that in a fictional setting where I can actually say the things that we say. And
I think that's the difference between TV in particular and books. TV is really pandering to the general populace. The general populace are not ambulance officers. So it is a small glimpse into the world of an ambulance officer. Whereas when you're in a book, you can really be and share anything with another person. You can put someone very safely in another person's shoes. Hopefully safely. There's a few books that are a bit questionable. But you can normally put them in someone else's shoes so they feel like they are part of the direct action and understand exactly what's going on, even if it's not fully there. It's like procedural crime books. Very similar. They're not detectives, but the jargon and what's happening around them is that they can just accept it. They can suspend that disbelief that they are not a detective, and they can feel like one for that instance.
I actually describe my short stories as trying to remember how the term I was using now, but basically it's paramedic procedurals. Yes, there's a lot of medical stuff in it, but I try and make it very, very simple in its explanation, and really showcase what we can do and but then also the difference between the vast majority of the work we go to and what we can do. And that's where the frustration comes. And also explaining that whole sort of good job aspect is that, I get home and the missus will say, any good jobs today? And what that means is that they're the jobs that people just freak out at. Normal people freak out at. The good jobs like, I went to this, and it's, that's the things where we actually get to use the skills and training and knowledge to actually make a difference. They're the good jobs. The vast majority of the jobs we go to don't really need an ambulance. Don't need crews can go weeks without opening their kit bags. So it can get frustrating at times, and eventually something's going to have to be done because it's just too expensive. At the end of the day, somebody's going to look at the economics involved in sending a two-person ambulance to somebody with a stubbed toe and go, hold on a minute, this isn't working. I mean, unfortunately for Queensland is that we do have this whether it's actually written in law, but anybody who wants an ambulance gets a response.
I think it's across the country, because unless it's a private hospital, of course, a private ambulance and a private hospital.
Queensland doesn't really have private ambulances. They have event ambulances. They have some PTS services. There are a few privatised ones of those, but they're not that common. The vast majority of all of the ambulance work, PTS is patient transport service, whether it's that or whether it's emergency work, it's all done through the ambulance service.
I wonder if they'd eventually look at having the mini ambulance go out instead.
We've already got that.
So having that or having more of that.
Well, I'm trying to be very careful because I'm realising this is going out out online. But so I have to be a bit more politically careful. There is what's known as low acuity, local area. I think it got changed to response units, which are the sort of
for the stubbed
toes. Silver ambulance.
The
little
like
ones. They're like people movers.
Yes.
And they have ambulance written on them, but they don't have the lights and things like that.
Yeah, they've got
They-
like the zoomies.
The idea that was that they would be sent out to the low acuity cases so that they could do, well, perhaps you need to go to your doctor. I can take you there and I'll drive you to your doctor, or I can drive you to here, there, and then. Their idea was, or the idea for that was that they would be then removing a lot of the burden on the emergency departments and looking for different pathways to, people call ambulance or call 000, they have a need.
Yeah.
It just isn't an ambulance
Yes.
in a huge proportion.
Sometimes they just
Sorry,
need a first
in a
aid.
proportion, they probably don't need an ambulance, and a large proportion is doctors. And when you look at the economics of it, a doctor can see, if you somewhere between 6 and 10 patients an hour,
Yes.
and one building can have 6 to 10 doctors in it. And although on a per hour basis you're paying a lot more for a doctor, the reality is they can see far more patients than an ambulance. We see a patient in 2 hours.
Yeah.
It'll take us 2 hours.
Oh yes. Yeah.
On average.
Yep.
And you've got to factor into the fact that if a doctor sees a person, they've got themselves there, and they're going to get themselves away. So you don't have to transport them.
Yeah.
So you get the call. We've got to get there. Then we've got to deal on scene, then transport, and then get to the hospital, and then hope that there's a bed that we can offload to at the hospital.
Yeah.
And that whole process can take a long time, and that just becomes incredibly expensive. And something has to break whereby people who are calling 000 actually get to not automatically get an ambulance. And I mean, something they are moving to is to having doctors in the call centres, and they actually then get to review the cases.
Good.
I would like to see a large number of doctors there with video phones so they can actually have a consultation.
Yeah.
And effectively they can
They could even coach people through on basic first aid.
Yep, and a lot of them can then say, no, you don't need an ambulance, you need to go and see your GP, or I can give you a script for that, or because a lot of it could actually come under telehealth.
Yeah.
And be charged, and it would be a wonderful way of the ambulance service actually having a new revenue stream by providing that service through the 000, because I think that now, whichever way we look at it, 000 has been, the whole sort of aspect of it being an emergency only is lost. It's been lost for a long time.
It sounds like a lot of people are using it for non-emergency. It's like just the hospital taxi, when really they could possibly be going to the hospital for something and carrying themselves there without having the ambulance. Or, like you said, going to their doctor for basic
unfortunately,
things.
a lot of the problems are the doctors at times, because they'll go, oh, we'll call an ambulance because it'll make it quicker through the ED for you.
Oh,
Even though the patient has got to the doctor's surgery, and
it's kind of
there's
arrogant.
nothing immediate that's going to cause it, but because even the doctors have this concept that if you arrive by ambulance, you'll go through the ED quicker, which is just total rubbish. You're triaged.
Yeah.
Whether you walk in, whether you drive in, whether you fly by helicopter, you're triaged.
Yep.
And whichever one is highest acuity will go into the next bed.
Yeah.
That's just the system, and so the idea that going by ambulance is going to get you seen quicker is not going to happen. And I did though, to give you some concept of this being an international thing. I had a chat with a mate back home in the UK recently, and I was saying how I was getting stuck on scene for 2 hours waiting for a transport crew to come and take the patient for me, and he went, oh yeah, the other night I was 7 hours on scene waiting for a crew to come and transport us.
Is that his whole shift, or like half a shift or something?
The job took most of his shift.
Oh my goodness.
Most of our shifts are 12 hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, he said the vast majority of the shift was taken up by this one job. He said I ended up falling asleep on the guy's couch because there's nothing he could do.
Oh no. So it is universal across the planet. I wonder if some super techie person will be able to help fix that. But I think the idea of having video consultation is really valuable.
I think that's probably the safest bet, because that would give having doctors in the call centre and having that sort of indemnify the service by having them there to make those decisions, because I often joke that doctors are covered in Teflon, and so nothing sticks, whereas Ambos are covered in Velcro, and so and everything that we touch is covered in little fluffy loops, and so yeah, we're generally guilty until proven innocent. If any complaint comes in. However, with doctors, it tends to be the other way.
They have enough insurance to be able to cover all of that and make sure they are Teflon.
Yes.
I'm so grateful that we have the system in place. So I am grateful it's not like the US. Because the people that can't afford it can still have their lives potentially saved without worrying that they're going to lose their house over it.
I couldn't imagine working in the States. I mean, I've just given a talk to there was a thing called there's a software called Pro Writing Aid, which is
I love it. I have a lifetime membership for it.
Same here. And they're now doing crime weeks, and they do presentations over a week for crime writers. They've done fantasy writers. They've done romance writers and stuff like that. And I was approached to do a talk last week with the Crime Writers Week, and so I did a pitch about how sort of ambulance work is portrayed in books, and how, because often people use movies and TV shows to base their books on, how many things go wrong, and how what we do is totally portrayed wrong in the media. And some of the things that I pitched it out to a Facebook group that I was part of, and almost instant, all these hundreds of responses basically saying, "Yep, don't know anything to get right," rather than anything that it's all wrong. But one of the main ones was flatlining. Is when you see on TV where somebody's in there and somebody rushes over, grabs some paddles, runs in and hits their chest, and shock, boom. You can shock a flatline, but there's no point. It's absolutely pointless.
Yeah.
You have to wait. The machines that we use are defibrillators.
Yeah,
so you gotta wait for
when
it
the heart
defibrillating.
is
So there has to be electrical activity in the heart to actually shock it back into a normal rhythm.
Yeah.
And we don't use paddles. We haven't used paddles for decades.
We
use sticky pads.
Yeah.
So because you can monitor through the sticky pads.
Yeah.
Because you can't monitor through paddles that you're waving around. And obviously there's safety issues in the back of an ambulance with paddles. Yeah. We haven't used those for decades. I mean, literally, I have not. The only time I've ever seen them used is on TV, or I've seen them in museums, but I've never actually seen them used.
There's so much more dramatic. You imagine the TV shows, how they completely change on a fundamental level if they have to put sticky pads on.
And the film Flatliners is just a concept that's just stupid. It doesn't. It's like, oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get a bad rap with my family because nobody wants to watch a medical drama. So I'm like, rolling the eyes and the like, and yeah, one of them, I get this, they'll turn to me and go, "So do they look dead?" It's like, yeah, not really.
It's the thing where when someone's meant to be dead on set, you watch them and see if they're still breathing.
The thing is, you just look at their colour, and most of the time they get it wrong because they're still pink. And so you just the mucous membranes or anything like that, the lips, you look and you go, "Nah, they're not dead." So,
Oh, that is so fascinating. I would love for everyone in the comments, when you are part of an actual industry, what does TV normally get wrong for your industry too? I think that would be a fantastic topic to talk about. Thank you so much for joining me today, Harry. This has been very insightful.
Thank you.
And I think it's been really valuable because what you've done is capture a period of history, and it's something that's going to be crucial in the future, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't realize that they can reflect upon and find the problems within and help change it as well. I think that when you get a politician who's very excited about health and well-being, when they hear it from the ground, what's happening, they're able then to put the assistance in where it's needed. Rather than just people in higher ups looking at number crunching. So
yes.
Your book is incredibly valuable, and I hope that it helps serve a greater purpose in the long run, as well as just entertaining all the crime lovers out there.
Well, hopefully, yes. And it's one of those, it does have this very dark humour, and there's a lot of people say that the humour is the sort of a whole sort of other aspect of a murder mystery with a lot of laughs. So.
I love that because I feel like Australians in particular love a good bit of dark humour.
Mm-hmm.
Australians and British share that.
Yes.
Very much so.
Absolutely.
You go to a lot of different countries and they are very affronted by our very crass sense of humour. And what we will laugh at.
I mean, that said, I mean, I had that attitude that Americans don't get British humour, and then I went and worked with a whole lot of Americans, and they're sort of some of them just loved the sort of Blackadder, all of that sort of stuff, and you go, really? You're not supposed to like that. You do
what
realise
do you mean
this.
You get sarcasm?
Absolutely, yeah. And I meant to mention about this whole private writing aid because it was a lot of American centric. A lot of the questions were about the American system and stuff like that. And so I had to try and give my talk saying that my experience is UK and Australian ambulance systems and how we work, but a lot of the people who were involved in this were American. And one story that I did get, and this was some time ago, I met a chap who was known as a trauma tech, who was an emergency medical technician on a fire truck. Yep. And he was saying that he couldn't work in the system anymore. And to give you an example, he'd arrive at a road traffic collision, and what would happen is his job was to support the patient while the other guys are cutting them out. And once they get him out, there would be a lineup of ambulances out ready to take the patient. And before they transfer them to the ambulance, they would find out what his insurance or what the person's insurance level was. Oh. If they didn't have a certain level of insurance, all the ambulances just left. Oh. And he said then there'll be another wave of ambulances that would turn up, who were all these sort of ambulance chaser legal ones, which would basically transport a patient with the assumption that they'll be able to sue somebody to pay for it. And he said, but it didn't stop there. When you get to the hospital, the patient would have a set of dog tags with different colours on them. So the person who was wearing the blue dog tags would get a whole trauma team would come down to see them. I had CT scans, there'd be everything going on. The guy with the green dog tags would be in the corridor because the level of insurance wasn't enough to cover for the trauma team or any of the other. And you just go,
that's horrific.
Wow.
That's I would rather waste resources.
They don't have triage. It's triage by insurance level.
I would rather waste resources and have things stuffed with things we don't need than to have that. That's terrible.
I can't even cope with it to the point that I don't take phone numbers. I don't take, if there's somebody from interstate, I don't take stuff like that because I'm not a money collector. I'm not interested in that. My job is to go in. When you call the ambulance, I get there and try and fix the problem.
Yeah.
Or get you to hospital to somebody who can.
It's a much more pure purpose as far as my God that. And then when they leave, it is customary for the hospital to give them an incorrect bill that has a heap more charges on it. Yes. And it's only when they call back up and they're like, can I have an itemized charge for this, that they then take 10% of the bill off because the insurance companies are just paying the bill without asking questions. And so these poor people are having their premiums raised because these hospitals are just trying to grab everything that they can because they're not funded properly.
There's very, two systems, Australia and the UK both have a very similar sort of setup. And it is a system that I'm happy to work within, but it would be very difficult working in somewhere like America where it's much more. There are ambulance services which are government-based ones, which are free, and they take them to the free hospitals and the like, but they're inundated.
Yeah, they would be.
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness we're in Australia. We are so grateful that we're in Australia.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
Even if the weather's a little bit bad at the moment.
At the moment, it is very drizzly. I'm sure we're in for more flooding. I know New South Wales is getting hit pretty hard, so please grab a book and stay safe. Thank you so much for coming today, Harry. This was really good.
Thank you very much.
This was a great chat. Please go and look up Harry Colfer's books. What was the name of your first book?
Dead Regular.
Dead Regular.
Hold on a minute. I even brought a copy for you too.
Oh, wonderful.
So we have Dead Regular, and we've got Beneath Contempt. Is the two books.
Very cool. So come and check these books out. You can also come and see Harry's talk at the Logan Writers Festival on September 9th and 10th. He will be there and you get to learn all about how an ambulance driver becomes an author.
Don't use ambulance driver, you get into trouble for that.
Well, oh no. All right, we'll talk about that more later. Have a fantastic day. We'll see you in September. Bye.
Bye-bye.